Hi, today I'm going to be talking about how you can avoid costly miscommunication by ensuring that all your spoken word communication is on point, or as we say, making things easy to follow. I'm Michael Barris, and this is Speaking for Career Growth. And in today's seventh part, the final installment in this seventh part series, I'm going to be using the last principle from my book, How to Become a Super Speaker, the 7 principles for speaking with confidence and connecting with audiences, to show you how to keep the thread of your talk, presentation, or meeting comments neat and on point. And that's a crucial task for speakers, whether you're in a meeting, a webinar, or delivering a speech, because a sloppy structure is the same thing as placing a road sign in the wrong place on a highway. And I hate to take a swing at New Jersey, the state where I live now, but sometimes they've had road signs in very weird places. And when that happens, it can cause a miscommunication, if you will, that can have bad consequences. Well, it's the same thing in a speech. It can be very costly if you're going to find out what happens if you don't get your messages across clearly. So before this talk is done, I'm going to give you a foolproof method, a way to bulletproof your narratives, the storylines in your talks, so that you can ensure that the narrative does what it's supposed to do in just everyday speaking situations, business and even outside of business. So you'll want to stick around for that. Now, in the meantime, before we get going, I'd like you to click on the link in the comments section on LinkedIn to get a free 30-minute consultation with me on how you can avoid costly miscommunication. I'll give you a basic plan for speaking with clarity and nuance. And that's really what you need to do in order to impress people, that they will let you talk with the higher ups and to maybe become a higher up yourself, because you'll show that you have the ability to speak in a coherent and compelling way and to make people answer calls to actions, to close deals, to do anything. And because as we know, speaking is a major part of doing business today. And if you're watching live or watching this on the playback, send me your questions, whether you're doing it right now in the comments section or DM me. I will answer all of them. Now, here's a key thing to know. The reason you have to keep things simple for an audience, and whether it's a meeting or a presentation or any kind of a spoken word communication, they don't always have the luxury of being able to play something back. I know we have tools which allow us to play back this. You can play back what I'm saying now. But I'm talking not just about live in-person appearances, but even in certain live communications like this, it isn't always possible for people to hit a button and immediately see what was just said. So you have to proceed as if once you say something, it's gone. You have to give them signposts so they'll know, well, here comes a change of logic. Here comes a change of tone. That's the key here. And that's what the best speakers to do, because they understand fully well that if you don't make things easy to follow, you pay a price. It kind of fits with my overall view that in speaking, the audience is everything, and you ignore that at your own peril. So here is a very concrete example of that, evidence of that research shows that miscommunication can cost businesses of, say, 100 employees between $4,000 and $6,000 per employee each year. Now, that's a lot of money. It adds up. And if it was a very big company with 100,000 employees, well, then the costs are something like $62 million. That's a pretty significant chunk of your revenue lost because people didn't express things clearly. And I'm going to get in later, very soon here, about how to explain technical things clearly, because technology is a very important part of business today, whether it's AI, whether it's Internet of Things. You're going to hear about that more in a moment. And it isn't really just the dollar value that's a concern here. There's more to it than just money. workers do not perform efficiently, productivity suffers, and getting trust from everybody who's involved in the project of achieving the mission, whatever it's the organizational mission, if it's getting a certain mission out or just getting a certain idea out or just serving the customer with good products, it all suffers, all because of miscommunication. So, and the miscommunication can start at the top, but it can go right through the organization if everybody isn't on the same page. In fact, the tougher it is to get a message through, the more you need a strong narrative. So, for example, as the illustration shows, this is how a lot of employees look when the clock strikes 3 p.m. Heads start banging off desks across America. Now, in the era of the pandemic or post-pandemic era, more people are working at home than ever. So maybe they're in their bathrobes or in their pajamas or in their slippers, but chances are they're still nodding off around 3 p.m. The only difference is they can go lie down on their bed and work with their computer from the bed. And of course, the supervisors don't know it, but they may well just be assuming, yeah, that's probably going on. So in that case, embrace it. You know that it's going to be tougher for you to get a message across later in the day or right after lunch or just before quitting time. So dig in. You need the stronger the narrative has to be. You have to crank up the energy. You have to make your ideas resonate. You have to choose words that vibrate with some energy. And you literally have to have a much bigger, more emphatic presence in an online environment like this. Now, let me give you an example how one of my clients took the things I'm talking about and managed to increase her revenue by creating a seamless narrative. We had to get inside her head because when I watched her speak initially, I could see that she had a good product. It was a product that helped get rid of ethical behaviors in supply chains. And I watched her doing a presentation. And although I knew she had good information at her fingertips, she delayed getting to the point. And of course, on this medium, people stick around for minutes. Sometimes they say 7 seconds before they decide to dump you for something more attractive. So later I said, Erica, you cannot delay getting to the point. You have to hit them bang right at the beginning. The way I told you at the outset of this talk today, that my focus was going to be on helping you save the costs of miscommunication by learning how to make things easy to follow. So we did some role playing. I pretended to be the audience. She pretended she was doing a pitch to me, and I corrected her there. Then we turned it around. I pretended to be her. She pretended to be the audience so she could put herself into the shoes of the audience and appreciate why sometimes the communication would fall short. And that's the key to all this, to everything we've been talking about here in these 7 principles for speaking with confidence and connecting with audiences. The key thing has been putting your shoes into the minds, putting your feet into the shoes of the audience and putting your feet into the shoes of the audience. That's the key. You have to empathize with them. You have to know where they're coming from. So this allowed her, it got her mindset in the right place. It allowed her to craft a clean narrative that got to the point faster, and it helped her to attract clients. And in the end, she increased her revenue significantly. So here's the crown jewels. Here are the keys to building a narrative that's easy to follow. First, you have to do some research. You have to say to yourself, who am I speaking for? Maybe they're not experts, or maybe they are experts, and therefore you might be wasting time by explaining things to them that they already know. What do they want to know? In other words, why did they come to this talk today, or in this communication? They've asked me a question. They're looking for an answer. They're hoping I can provide some value to them. But then you have to say, well, what do they really need to know? Because they may not understand what they need to know, especially if they're coming from a different culture or are non-native English speakers. You have to kind of anticipate their problems and head them off before the communication goes off the rails. Then when it comes to crafting the talk, you need to use keywords. Now, this applies especially if you're speaking to a larger group of any kind. You don't want to have a script written out and then just be regurgitating it, memorized word for word. You want to just go through your plan and pick out 1 or 2 words every sentence that resonate with you emotionally, so that it'll help charge up your delivery of the words. And then another thing to do is you want to tell the audience what is, not what isn't. Quite often, I'll find myself writing a sentence when I'm planning out a talk, something like, this didn't work because of, and you might want to say something like that. The solution to this was so-and-so. However, the group did not see this because, in other words, don't fall back on telling us what didn't happen. Tell us what did actually happen. And perhaps if it didn't work, explain why. Keep putting things in the most positive way. So we feel the action, we feel the positive energy, and it's more enlightening. I think the mind has to work too hard to figure out a not statement than it does to appreciate an is statement. And then use you. Literally, I'm in this online forum, I try to treat it as if there's you and there's me, and I'm just talking for one person only. I mean, obviously I'm hoping that there are many people at this moment tuning in, hearing my words, but when I am tailoring the communication, it's just to you on the other side of that webcam. Now, when you are orienting the talk, here's how you can make language your friend. People often will jump around in times and in locations, and it can get hard for the audience to follow, especially if, as I say, there's no opportunity for a replay. So choose words that are acting as signposts, that are signaling, right turn coming up here, left turn coming up here. Things like meanwhile, or in other words, or furthermore. Those are connecting words that help effect transitions from one mood or type of logic to another. And then there's the location. Be clear that if at one moment they were in Toronto and another moment they were in Buffalo, say that by the time we returned to Buffalo. Now, you may think this is very elementary, but you'd be amazed how often people overlook doing these simple little things. Because remember, it's much harder for an audience, for a speech, or for spoken word communication to picture things than it is for people who have it written down in front of them. So also things like, if say you're referring to a political candidate and you're trying to point out that he's contradicting himself. In Pittsburgh, the candidate had told CNBC that blah, blah, blah. In other words, you are trying to orient the audience as much as possible with great clarity to the changes in time and location. It's not a complicated thing, but it's a major thing if they don't know 1 minute or the other, whether they're in Buffalo or whether they're in Pittsburgh or Toronto. Now, when you're delivering the talk, here are some more pointers. You may have heard me speak, if you've been following us all along, about the importance of arousing an audience emotionally. So you got to be in touch with your emotions when you're speaking to the crowd, because that's how you're going to know how well you're resonating. This is something I learned when I used to teach elementary school a long time. I taught grades 5 and 6. And one thing I learned in Teachers College in Toronto was that if you got the feeling that you were being frustrated, the student may have been putting up a roadblock for one reason or another, and you had to learn how to get through that roadblock. Maybe you had to change your language. Maybe you had to have a better understanding of the student's motives in creating a roadblock. The point was you had to be listening to your feelings. They were your guide to figuring out, what's going on here. It would help you to troubleshoot problems. Now, you also need to be mindful of the fact that if you're nervous, you're a little excited, you might overtalk. And people have limited time to listen, as these LinkedIn Lives are proving every week when I do them. People are around for a few minutes, then they're gone. Sometimes they stay, sometimes they don't. You need to be mindful of the tendency to overtalk. And one way to control that, again, being connected to your feelings, if you feel yourself starting to ramble a bit, just pause. Pauses are not that big a deal in speaking. In fact, sometimes it makes you look more dramatic and more powerful. But it will give you the opportunity, if you pause for just 5 seconds, to gather your thoughts, and maybe it settles you down a bit, and then you continue. So the other thing is that, again, I don't want you to be memorizing a script, but you know the ideas you're trying to punch across. So try to feel each word. The words that carry emotion more than others, dig into them more, building an easy to follow narrative. Speaking for career growth. Part 7, make things easy to follow. It's being an actor, but as I've been saying all along, when you're speaking, you're a performer. The people listening to you are an audience. The place you're speaking from is a stage. And the laws say, the unwritten laws, call it the Mike Barris laws of speaking, if you will, I hope. Audiences expect performers on stages to put on shows. So punch the words and make your show come alive. The other thing is that, remember that a narrative is a storyline. This is a story. So tell your story, lean into the story, make it interesting, love your story. Tell them that, yeah, it was worth their time to sidle up alongside you and ask you this question because they're getting a very interesting story in return. Remember, you're a performer. Put everything, put your love into it, put your energy into it, and make it worth the time of the listener. You'll pay them no greater compliment. Now, in case your audience is waiting for an explanation of a technical thing, and assuming that you have some technical expertise yourself, you have some technical background and you're trying to explain a technical concept to an audience of non-experts, first of all, you have to learn their knowledge limits. It's generally wiser, instead of dwelling too much on process, all the arcane details, emphasize what the technology can do rather than how it works. Use visual presentation aids to help you. In other words, draw them a picture in whatever way you do that, because it helps them understand. And use things like analogies. Compare things that already perhaps are existing and familiar to the new thing you're trying to introduce, and explain how that maybe differs from the familiar thing. Simplify the communication for audiences when they're non-native English speakers. And remember that if they are non-native English speakers, chances are they may also be coming from a culture that is different from yours. And you need more than ever to rely on being clear and speaking with nuance and simplifying. All right. Now, I recently received these questions from you, and I'm going to deal with them here now. People tell me that, this is what people have written to me. People tell me they have trouble following my speech. How can I fix that? And the answer is, as we've been saying all along, provide those signpost transition words that will signal a change in logic, tone, or context is coming up. Think of yourself as guiding somebody driving on a highway. They got to know when to get off the turnpike. They don't want to go by their exit, something that also happens in New Jersey. And they're counting on you to take them by the hand, not only to show them or to tell them about knowledge that's worth knowing, but also to deliver them to the destination of the speech. Only you can do that. Don't let them down. The next question is, how can I test my speech for clarity and flow? Now, this is something I learned back when I was teaching at Rutgers University. I taught public speaking and introductory essay writing, what was also called expository writing. And if there's anyone here from Rutgers who's listening, drop in and say hello. The point is that just as when you're doing an essay, you might want to line up each topic sentence or the first sentence of each paragraph, so that if you just read the topic sentences, they would kind of form a coherent paragraph on their own. It's kind of the same thing with speaking. You have the bones of the speech. So each sentence that introduces an idea should link up with the next, or it should advance the next, so that if you were just to look closely at your introductory sentences, they would form a coherent idea on their own. And that's the way to test that. If it seems to have a complete beginning, middle, and end, you've done your job. All right, the last question here is, how do I create keywords that work for me? And I've said many times that you don't want to get involved in memorizing a text or any kind of a speech, because when you do that, you lose your eye contact. As I've said, you'll be looking at the ceiling saying, oh, we had a very impressive third quarter. But you want to keep your eyes on the audience all the time. So it's best to, you can write out a speech or something you're going to say at a meeting or an answer or expected answers to Q&As. But the thing is, don't try to memorize the words. You can get familiar with the material, but just pick out a word or two from each sentence that will arouse you emotionally. And then cut everything out of that draft, except those keywords, and just practice those keywords. The reason why we do this is that the audience will react more enthusiastically and be more receptive, and you will resonate more vividly with them if it seems that everything that comes out of your mouth is fresh language and spontaneous language and fresh thought. It feels more like a dialogue when you do that. And all good speaking creates the feeling of a back and forth, so that even if you weren't really expecting the audience to jump out at that moment or even really wanted them to, there would be the feeling that they were just in a conversation with an expert. And that's how it should be. All right, once again, if you haven't done it, click on the link in the comments on LinkedIn. You'll see a little squib with me urging you to click here to find out how to avoid costly miscommunication. If you do that, I'll give you a free 30-minute consultation with me on how to avoid miscommunication. Basically, a plan for speaking with confidence so you look like a leader, you inspire people, and you look like somebody who's really going places and probably deserves to be in the running or in the conversation for some kind of a leadership position. Friends, that's a wrap. I want to thank you very much for listening. If you've followed me all the way along in our 7-part series, thank you very much. Feel free to drop in comments or to connect with me at any time for any questions you may have about how to become a stronger, more persuasive speaker so that you can get promoted, get a better job, get a raise, look like a thought leader, become an influencer, make a lot more money. These are all valid reasons, and it can all happen through the power of public speaking, which truly is $1 million skill, depending on how far you want to go with it. So follow me on LinkedIn, and I will see you around. Click on my posts, say hello on a DM, and I'll be in touch with you too. And as my friend Price Pritchett, the well-known business consultant and author, says, if you must doubt something, doubt your limits. Thank you, and bye for now.